Okay, welcome back. Your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. State calls Rachel Nguyen.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony about to be in this case to be the truth and the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please have a seat, state your full name for the record.
My name is Rachel Nguyen,
Can you spell your last name?
Nguyen.
Agent Nguyen, where do you work?
I work at the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, most commonly known as SLED.
And how long have you worked for SLED?
I've worked for SLED, it's going to be 7 years in September.
And what do you do there?
I'm currently a forensic serologist within the DNA casework department.
And what kind of training have you gotten to be a forensic serologist?
I've received in-house training at SLED for the component of forensic serology. I went under a year-long training process under a court-qualified forensic serologist. During this time, I was able to observe the different evidence processing techniques as well as the different types of analysis we perform there. Also during this time, I was able to practice these various techniques under close supervision. After time had passed, I then went through training samples, which I performed independent analysis to prove my knowledge and abilities to perform the various tests we perform in the serology department. Once that was successfully completed, I then entered a competency phase. So that's testing my knowledge and abilities to perform all the techniques that we perform independently. This competency phase included a written exam, an oral exam, a competency test, which is a mock case, as well as a mock court. Once all these components were successfully completed, I was then deemed able to do independent analysis within the area of forensic serology. After that time, I did undergo another year-long training process in the area of DNA extraction and DNA quantitation. Briefly, what that is that would be trying to pull out DNA from different substances and then seeing if there's any present. That was much similar to my serology training. I was supervised under a court-qualified DNA analyst. I was able to observe the various extraction techniques as well as the quantitation process. Then I performed various practice samples. These samples are non-casework samples to prove my ability to perform these different techniques. Then, much similar to my serology training, I had to perform these techniques independently on training samples. There were 50 of them. Once that was completed, I then went under another competency phase. It was very similar. There was a written exam, an oral exam, a mock case, and then a mock court. Once all these components were successfully completed, I was then able to do independent casework from the portion of DNA extraction to DNA quantitation.
And you talked about the testing. Did you pass all of your tests?
I did pass all of my testing.
And have you been qualified as an expert before?
I have been qualified as an expert before.
In what fields?
Forensic serology.
This time, Your Honor, I'd ask that Agent Nguyen be qualified as an expert in the field of forensic serology.
Any objection?
No objection.
She's so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Agent Nguyen, how did you become involved in this case?
So my involvement in this case is relatively recent. The DNA analyst, Dewane, requested me to perform blood screening on a couple sets of swabs and then the DNA extraction and quantitation on them.
So I'm going to stop you for a second. The jury's heard a little bit about sort of the presumptive positive, so I'm just going to go straight to DNA extraction. Can you explain to them what is DNA extraction?
Do you want me to explain what I did or in general?
Just in general, what is it?
So in general, we're going to take, I'm sure you heard about the cuttings that serologists take from clothing or other items and swabs that they collect potential DNA for. I'm going to take small portions of those swabs or cuttings and then I'm going to try to pull the DNA out of those to separate it out. Following that, it will be quantitated, so to see if there's a quantity there, whether there's DNA present or if it's absent, and if present, how much is there.
How do you pull it? Like, how does that happen?
So the process is that a small cutting of the swab, which is a sterile Q-tip-like device, or a cutting, I will cut an even smaller portion off of that. I'll put it in a test tube. I will add reagents, which are chemicals that aid in kind of pulling the biologicals from the substance. After that, I will put it on an instrument. An instrument is a scientific machine. It will aid in the extraction process. So once again, it's trying to pull it away from the cotton swab or the cutting of the shirt and just isolate it so it's by itself. Then I will take that portion of the liquid that's in the test tube and I will put it on a different instrument or scientific device, and that it will analyze it and then give us data, which I do not read the data. The DNA analyst, Ryan Dewane, will review it.
So now I'm going to go to what you did in this case.
Okay.
So item 67, is that one of the items you tested?
May I review my notes?
You may.
Yes, item 67 is an item I tested.
And what was item 67?
Item 67 is swabs from the rear side of center console of the Chevrolet Impala.
And what was your job? What did you do in this particular item?
So upon receiving this evidence, I took a sterile swab, once again, is like a sterile Q-tip. I dampened it with sterile water. Then I applied that to the swabs that were submitted to try to pull any stain off. Then I performed our phenolphthalein test, which is a presumptive test to see the possible presence of blood.
What was the result of that test?
The result was positive.
So what did you do based on that?
So because it was positive, as I briefly mentioned before, I cut a small portion of the swab and put it in a test tube to extract and quantitate.
And then testing it any further is not your job, is that correct?
No, after quantitation, all the samples will be handed to Ryan Dewane.
Now I want to move to item 71. What is item 71?
Item 71 is swabs from front passenger seat headrest of the Chevrolet Impala.
And what was the result of that testing?
It was presumptively positive for phenolphthalein, which is our blood screening test.
So what did you do based on that?
I did the same thing that I did with the item 67 that I just mentioned. So since it was positive, I cut a portion out and then did the extraction and quantitation.
And item 72?
Item 72 are swabs from rear passenger seat of the Chevrolet Impala.
What was the result of that test?
Those were positive for phenolphthalein, and the same process occurred as the previous swabs.
And item 75?
Item 75 were swabs from side of driver's seat headrest of the Chevrolet Impala.
And again, what was the result of that test?
That was positive for phenolphthalein.
So what did you do based on that?
The same thing as the previous sets of swabs.
Item 76?
Item 76 is swabs from rear driver's side seat of Chevrolet Impala.
And what was the result of that test?
It was positive for phenolphthalein.
So what did you do based on that?
The same process as the previous swabs.
All right. Item 77.
Item 77 is swabs from driver's seat, seat buckle receiver of Chevrolet Impala.
What was the results of that test?
It was also positive for the phenolphthalein test.
Based on that, what did you do?
The same as the previous swabs that I've mentioned.
Now, 125.1, what was that?
Item 125.1 are swabs from sole of right shoe of pair of pink Adidas size 9K shoes from closet underneath stairs from Maria Howard's residence.
And did you do any testing to that?
I did not do any testing. From my understanding, they had already been tested with phenolphthalein.
So even though on this report there's some things that you did, there's some things that other people did, is that fair to say?
Yes.
May the court's indulgence. Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
The police court, Your Honor.
Yes.
Just briefly, what day, what's the date that you were asked to do this testing?
I do not have a record of the specific date it was requested, but I do have the date and time I took them into my custody.
Okay, what is that?
Okay. I took them into my custody on June 11th of 2021 at 12:44. Those were the everything in our container L. A container just holds multiple items. So that would be items 67, 71, 72, 75, 76, and 77. Item 125.1, I took into my custody at the same time. So June 11th, 2021 at 12:44.
2021, not 2019.
2021.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further?
No, sir.
Let me step down. Your next witness.
The state calls Agent Ryan Dewane.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please have a seat, state your full name and record.
Thank you.
Ryan Dewane, D-E-W-A-N-E.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Agent Dewane, where are you employed?
I work for the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, also known as SLED.
Please tell the jury what your duties are at SLED.
I am a forensic scientist assigned to the DNA casework department,
How long have you been there?
approximately 5.5 years.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about your background, training, and any additional experience you might have?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology pre-professional from Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. I also have 2 minors in chemistry and English. I'm currently pursuing my Master's of Science degree in biology from Clemson University in Greenville, South Carolina. During my education, I have completed courses in molecular biology, genetics, statistics, and biochemistry. These 4 courses are considered the foundations of forensic biology. When I was hired at SLED, I underwent an extensive training program. This training program included practice samples, training samples, mock cases, written exams for DNA and serology, a report writing exam, an oral exam, a technical review exam, a competency, and a mock court exam.
Do you participate in any training or continuing education?
Yes, we are required to complete approximately 8 hours of continuing education yearly.
How many times have you ever testified in court before?
I have,
Approximately how many times?
8 times.
And have you ever been qualified as an expert?
I have
In what field?
forensic DNA analysis and serology.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer Agent Dewane as an expert in DNA analysis, forensic DNA analysis and serology.
Any objection?
No objection.
She's so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Dewane, what is DNA?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. This is just a chemical found in all of our bodies. We get half of it from our mother and half from our father, and aside from identical twins, no 2 people will have the same DNA profile.
So when we talk about DNA analysis, what does that mean?
DNA analysis is our process of developing a DNA profile from either evidence or a known standard.
You said developing a DNA profile. What does that mean?
A DNA profile is your biological DNA represented in the form of a series of numbers, and this is what we use to compare.
So in terms of comparison, what are you doing with the DNA profile in order to compare it? How does that process work?
We develop a DNA profile from known individuals associated with the case. We then compare their profile to the evidence profiles developed.
Okay. And when you do that, what does it mean if you come back with the result that a particular profile is included?
This means that the individual is possibly included in the mixture or profile.
What is a mixture?
A mixture is an item that has multiple individuals on the same item.
An item that has multiple individuals on the same item. Is that what you said?
That's correct.
Okay, so this pen, for example, if I were to hand it to you, would it be possible that both my DNA profile and your DNA profile would be on the pen?
Yes, that is possible.
And so would it be possible then for there to be a mixture of your profile and my profile on the pen?
That is correct.
So if you receive an item of evidence, if you receive this pen under that example, what would you do in order to determine which profile belongs to which person?
We use a statistical software program called Ystr to do our comparisons.
And as a result of using that software, you can have a result where somebody, I believe you said, is included in the mixture, correct?
That is correct.
Could you also have a DNA profile excluded?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So you used Ystr, you said, to conduct this analysis, correct?
That is correct.
How do you report results of that analysis?
If we have any possible inclusions, then we report that conclusion with a statistic.
Okay. Is the same true about exclusions?
If an individual is excluded, then we just say that they are excluded from the profile.
With no statistical value to the level of exclusion, I guess?
That is correct.
Okay. So when you're talking about these statistics, you said you assign a statistical value if there's a profile included, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So how do you explain what that statistic is and what that means?
We have a verbal scale at the end of our reports. This shows our level of support based on the number that's generated.
And what does that verbal scale consist of?
We have multiple levels of support. Our lowest level is weak support. We then have, moderate support, strong support, and then very strong support.
So the highest level of certainty, not certainty, but the highest level statement that you would make about the inclusion of my DNA on this pen, if the science backed it up, are you saying that would be that there is very strong support for my inclusion?
For that conclusion, yes.
Okay. Do you guys, in regards to Ystr, that type of analysis, do you use the word match?
We do not.
And does that mean that you're any less confident about a particular result than if you did use the word match?
No.
So you said that there's a number that you associate, a statistical value, right? How does that number, what is the relationship between that number and the level of support in the verbal scale you just described?
The larger the number is, the more support will be associated with it. Our strongest level of support starts at 1 million and above.
All right. And when you're talking about these statistics, can you tell the jury what in the context of that, what a likelihood ratio means?
A likelihood ratio is the type of statistic that we calculate for Ystr. This is simply a mathematical comparison of two possible scenarios that it could explain the DNA profile that we get. The number that is generated is always supporting which scenario is more likely to create that profile.
Two scenarios, you compare them. One scenario suggests what?
The first scenario suggests that an individual is included,
And the second?
that they're excluded or it's someone else.
Okay. Shifting gears slightly, just talking about DNA in general, because there's obviously a lot of items of evidence that you tested. how is it that DNA evidence actually ends up on a person or an item or a thing?
We can get DNA evidence from biological fluids such as saliva, sweat, or blood. We can also get it from hair, and most commonly we get it from touch, which just means that you leave cells behind when you touch something.
Okay, and that could be from any other person that you come in contact with?
That is correct.
Could it end up even be any person that you have not come in close contact with?
Under certain circumstances, that is correct.
Okay. Now, conversely, can you talk about some reasons how I could come in close contact with someone and their DNA does not end up somewhere on me?
This would depend on many different factors. If you did not physically interact with the person, it is unlikely that your DNA would be present. If you're wearing clothing and they only touch your clothing, it's less likely that your DNA would be transferred. If you're to touch their skin and they're sweating, then that's a higher chance of collecting their DNA. Some individuals are also what we call shedders, which is a phenomenon where some people end up shedding their cells much more frequently than the average person.
All right, thank you. Let's turn your attention to the specific items in the case that you tested. You generated a lengthy report in connection with this case, is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Okay. All right, I want to turn your attention to item 2 on your report. And what is item 2?
Item 2 is swabs from the left shoe back white in color portion of Nathaniel Rowland.
Okay. And do you have any results for that item as it relates to Samantha Josephson?
I do.
And what is your result?
A DNA profile suitable for comparison was developed. The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture, versus scenario 2, where it's 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals that contributed to the mixture, meaning she's not a contributor. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 3.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Tying back in our verbal scale, what level of support is that for Samantha Josephson's inclusion in the profile on Mr. Rowland's shoe?
This would fall into our very strong support range.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about a couple other items of Mr. Rowland, relating to Mr. Rowland. Item number 4, that's your item number, not an exhibit number. Item 4 are swabs from underneath Mr. Rowland's right hand fingernails, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And what was your, well, let me ask you this. What results do you have related to Ms. Josephson in regard to Mr. Rowland's right hand fingernails?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. Because these are Nathaniel Rowland's fingernails, we can expect his DNA to reasonably be there. So his DNA profile is considered in both scenarios. So scenario 1 is Nathaniel Rowland, Samantha Josephson, and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture, versus the scenario where Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 94 million times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland, Samantha Josephson, and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Just making sure I got it. So we're talking about Mr. Rowland's right hand fingernails, correct?
That is correct.
And obviously he's going to be included in that mixture, correct?
It's reasonable to expect his DNA to be included.
And there's according to your verbal scale, very strong support that Ms. Josephson is included as well.
That is correct.
All right, turning your attention to item number 50 in your report. I'm sorry, forgive me, I jumped ahead of myself. Item number 5. That is left-hand fingernails of Mr. Rowland, correct?
That is correct.
All right, what was the result of your comparison on that item?
The DNA profile developed is a mixture of at least 5 individuals. Due to the complexity of the mixture, no further interpretation will be offered.
Can you explain why that is?
We can only interpret up to 4 individuals in a mixture. Because this was so complex, we are unable to separate individuals, and therefore we do not use it for comparisons.
Too many contributors to the profile, so you can't even come to a conclusion about it.
That is correct.
Item 50, please. That's page 22 of your report. And item 50 is a cutting from the heel area of Mr. Rowland's black socks, correct?
This is item 50.1.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, thank you. Can you distinguish the difference between why there's a .1?
Yes, this is called a sub-item. The parent item or the original item is item 50, and when a forensic serologist takes a cutting, it then becomes sub-itemized, so it's 50.1.
When you say cutting, do you mean a literal piece of the fabric of, in this case, a sock would have been cut out and taken from the sock and given to you for further interpretation?
That is correct.
Okay. So this 50.1 is a cutting from Mr. Rowland's sock?
That is correct.
And what was your result regarding Ms. Josephson's inclusion on that?
A DNA profile suitable for comparison was developed. The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture versus a scenario where it's 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals that contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 4 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
All right, so, okay, thank you. Item 54, excuse me, 54.1.1 on page 23. Cutting from bandana from Mr. Rowland, is that right?
That is correct.
Show you. Already been marked as states 11. States 11 that is in evidence. I believe these are the 2 bandanas that were taken. Does that look to be correct?
I did not see the parent item, I only received a cutting.
Okay, fair enough. What was your first comparison on that item?
This was a comparison to Samantha Josephson. The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus the scenario where it's 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals that contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 2.6 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Okay, so earlier you talked about mixtures. So this item is a mixture, you said, of 3 different individuals, is that correct?
That is correct.
And based on what you've just described, is it your testimony that as one of the contributors to that mixture, there is very strong support that it is Ms. Josephson, is that right?
In order for this DNA profile to have been developed, yes.
All right. So as far as a second profile and your second comparison on that item, the bandana for Mr. Rowland, what was your conclusion there?
Under the same scenarios, but comparing Nathaniel Rowland, the DNA profile is approximately 14 sextillion times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
14 sextillion, is that in the very strong support category?
It is.
So of the 3 profiles found in the bandana, very strong support for Samantha, correct?
That's correct.
And very strong support for Mr. Rowland, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then part of the statement is that there's also, could be an unidentified, unrelated individual, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, this jury has heard you several times thus far reference that phrase, unrelated, unidentified individual. Can you explain why that phrase is so prevalent throughout your report?
Whenever we have a mixture of, in this example, 3 individuals, if we can have positive associations with multiple people, but we have an unknown profile that does not match any of the standards submitted in this case, then we just label that as an unidentified, unrelated individual.
Every time you reference this unidentified, unrelated individual, are you talking about one person, like the same person for each one?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. So it could be one person who's not part of your known profiles to compare on one item and somebody completely different on another item.
Yes, that is possible.
Okay. All right. I want to turn your attention to a grouping of items you tested relating to Ms. Josephson. So I'm going to send you back to item number 11 from your report from page 8. And in regards to items 11 through 15, are those all, according to your report, suspected hairs from the body of Ms. Josephson?
That is correct.
In regards to 11.1 and 11.1, hair from the right hand of Ms. Josephson, 11.2, a hair, 12, suspected hair from right hand of Ms. Josephson, and 13, well, we'll just go through those first 3. In regards to those, what were your results related to Ms. Josephson?
For item 11.1, the DNA profile was interpreted as a single source. The first scenario is that Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile versus scenario 2 where it's an unidentified, unrelated individual that contributed the profile. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 6.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile. For item 11.2, the DNA profile was interpreted as single source. Scenario 1 is Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile versus scenario 2 where it's an unidentified, unrelated individual that contributed the profile. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 7.1 quintillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile. For item 12, the DNA profile was interpreted as single source. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile. Scenario 2 is an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the DNA profile. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 6.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile.
For each of those items that you just discussed, those hairs, you indicated that the profile was from a single source. What does that mean?
That means one individual is on the item.
So you know that there's only one individual present in the item, correct?
That is correct.
And you make two hypotheses about that one thing, and in this instance, you're saying that one hypothesis is Ms. Josephson is included, correct?
That is correct.
And the other is that it's somebody else.
That is correct.
But your ultimately, are you stating that there's very strong support that she is her DNA profile is the contributor to the single source item?
There is very strong support to see this DNA profile if Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile rather than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile.
All right, thank you. And is it fair to say that the same would be true for the same conclusions in terms of very strong support for Ms. Josephson's inclusion would be correct for items 14.1, suspected hair, and 14.2, suspected hair, and 15, suspected hair from crotch region of pants on Samantha Josephson?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, I want to turn your attention to item 16. And that deals with fingernail scrapings from Ms. Josephson. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, and do you have that broken down into some sub items?
I do.
Okay, 16.1, right fingernail scrapings from Samantha Josephson. What are your results related to Ms. Josephson in that regard?
The DNA profile developed is attributable to Samantha Josephson.
All right, and what are your results as it pertains to Mr. Rowland on that item?
Nathaniel Rowland is excluded as a possible contributor.
For the right-hand fingernail scrapings of Ms. Josephson, correct?
That is correct.
And that was done by the star mix analysis that you talked about earlier, that process?
That is correct.
Is there a second type of process or analysis that you can do in regards to DNA profiles as well that's separate from the star mix?
Yes.
What is that?
We also perform what is called Ystr testing.
What is Ystr testing?
Ystr testing is a type of technology that allows us to just isolate male DNA.
Just for male DNA?
That is correct.
Okay. So did you perform Ystr testing on this item, 16.1?
I did.
And the process for conducting those tests is completely different from the star mix that you described earlier?
The statistic is different.
The statistic is different. Thank you. So the likelihood ratios, the numbers you've been reciting, do you do that same thing for the Ystr analysis?
No, it is a different type of statistic.
Okay. Did you conduct that analysis on this item?
I did.
And what was the result?
The partial Ystr profile developed is insufficient for interpretation.
What does that mean?
That means that there was not enough DNA developed to interpret.
So in other words, you've tried to take a second route to see what profile could be found under Ms. Josephson's right-hand scrapings, but there wasn't enough there for you to interpret the results.
That is correct.
Okay. Now let's talk about 16.2, which is her left-hand fingernail scrapings. Again, in that situation, under the star mix, under star mix, what was your finding?
The DNA profile developed is attributable to Samantha Josephson.
And, I'm sorry, was Mr. Rowland included or excluded as part of that?
Nathaniel Rowland is excluded as a possible contributor.
Did you attempt to do any Ystr analysis on that item?
I did.
And what was the result?
No Ystr profile was developed.
Okay. And how is that different from what you just described a moment ago about insufficient for interpretation?
No profile developed means there was no DNA developed. Insufficient means there was a little bit of DNA, but not enough to interpret it or make any comparisons to it.
All right. Now those were scrapings, I believe, but item 17 are fingernail clippings from Ms. Josephson's right hand. What's the difference between a scraping and clipping?
A fingernail clipping is when you clip the nail off the tip of the nail. A scraping is when you take a device and you just scrape underneath the nail and then you swab that device for DNA.
And again, on 17, that one, the fingernail clippings from the right hand, the profile belongs to Ms. Josephson, is that right?
The DNA profile developed is attributable to Samantha Josephson.
And regarding Mr. Rowland?
Nathaniel Rowland is excluded as a possible contributor.
Excluded meaning there's no presence of his DNA under those items on that item. Pursuant to star mix analysis, correct?
That is correct. There was no other profile developed.
No other profile developed, okay. Was there a Ystr profile developed on this item?
Yes.
All right, and what was the result of that profile's analysis?
Due to the inability to determine a number of contributors, no further interpretation will be offered regarding the Ystr profile.
Why does the number of contributors to a profile impact whether or not you can interpret it?
For this type of testing, we need to know how many individuals are included in order to know if it's suitable for statistics.
So you couldn't determine how many people were present as part of this Ystr profile, correct?
That is correct.
All right, let's talk about number 18, item 18, fingernail clippings from the left hand of Ms. Josephson. What are your results related to Ms. Josephson? Well, let me ask you this. What is your first comparison regarding that item?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. Samantha Josephson is contributing to the mixture. These are her fingernails, so we can reasonably expect her DNA to be present, so she will be present in both scenarios. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson, the person of interest, which just means whoever we're comparing to this mixture, and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture, versus the scenario of it being Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals that contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is, under the listed propositions, the following individuals are excluded as contributors to this mixture: Xavier McFadden, Nathaniel Rowland, Marcus Dewane Williams, Maria Howard, Oshimer Williams, and Derod Fleming.
All of those individuals are excluded from the profile from Ms. Josephson's nail clippings.
That is correct.
All right. Did you do a Ystr test on that one?
I did.
And what was the result?
The Ystr profile developed is a mixture of at least 2 male individuals. The Ystr profile of the major contributor to this mixture is from an unidentified male individual A. Due to the limited information developed, no further interpretation will be offered regarding the minor contributor.
All right, so now we're into a whole nother territory with the Ystr that we haven't talked about previously. You just described in the Ystr that there can be a major contributor and a minor contributor to the Ystr profile?
That is correct.
All right, what does that mean?
A major contributor means that they're the individual contributing the most DNA to a mixture. A minor contributor is the profile that is left.
And you said as far as the major goes, it's an unidentified individual?
That is correct.
And again, this could be somebody completely different from the unidentified individuals you mentioned earlier.
Yes, that is correct.
Or it could be the same.
That is correct.
Or it could be any number of anybody at any point.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And because of the limited information, you're saying you could not come up with anything for the minor, is that right?
Yes, no further interpretation could be offered regarding the minor.
All right, so regarding the minor contributor to this Ystr analysis of, just for reference, Ms. Josephson's left-hand fingernail clippings, the major, you say, is unidentified, right?
That is correct.
As far as the minor goes, of all the standards that you have in the case, to include Mr. Rowland and the other names that you just read out, can any of those standards be included or excluded as a minor contributor on that?
I can make no comparisons to any of the individuals concerning the minor contributor.
Just can't say one way or the other because there's not enough information.
That is correct.
All right. You spoke earlier about the ability for a person to pick up DNA from various places. I believe you talked about touch DNA. Can you talk about that a little bit more, about what touch DNA is?
Touch DNA is skin cells left behind when you touch an item.
Okay. And how could a person, say, in a courtroom or a bar or a restaurant, pick up some sort of touch DNA onto their person?
There are many scenarios where this could happen. If you were to touch something like a doorknob, then you may leave your DNA there. Another individual may then touch behind you, and you could also pick up their DNA. If you were to touch someone's arm, then you can pick up their DNA or leave your DNA behind. There are certain circumstances wherein it's more likely to leave DNA. For instance, if that individual is sweating and you touch their arm, it's more likely that their DNA will, you'll pick up their DNA rather than if you don't.
And in regards to this item, we were just most recently talking about Ystr testing, correct?
That is correct.
So we're talking about male DNA profiles.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be unusual to you if an individual was riding in a car with multiple males to have a Y profile appear under someone's nails or on their person?
I cannot offer an opinion on that. I can say that if there is contact, or if an individual were to touch something that had a lot of another individual's DNA on it, then yes, you could pick up their DNA.
Okay, all right. In regards to item 19, which is a swab from Ms. Josephson's left ankle, what were your results related to Ms. Josephson?
A DNA profile suitable for comparison was developed. DNA attributable to Samantha Josephson is present in this profile. DNA not attributable to Samantha Josephson is also present in this profile. Due to the limited information obtained regarding the foreign contributor, no further comparisons will be offered.
All right. Go ahead.
The partial Ystr profile developed is a mixture of at least 3 male individuals. Due to the inability to calculate a statistic, no further interpretation will be offered.
All right, so we're talking about her left ankle, and obviously she's part of the profile, correct?
That is correct.
It's a mixture, is that right?
Yes,
And one part of the mixture is her,
that is correct.
but you can't determine how many other contributors there are to the mixture.
That is
right?
correct. It was too limited.
Okay, and that was for the star mix analysis, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
For the Ystr, there's a mixture of how many individuals?
At least 3 male individuals.
But you're unable to calculate a statistic of that nature, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Can you talk about some of the ways in which, we've talked about touch DNA in terms of like your hands, you touch the doorknob, you touch something like that. Well, this item deals with ankle. So how is it that a person could obtain a foreign, if you will, DNA profile on their ankle?
Again, there are many different circumstances that could lead to this. If someone were to touch your ankle, then your DNA profile could be present. If the individual were to rub up against another individual's leg or anything that maybe they had a lot of DNA on, these are also circumstances when it would be possible to pick up their DNA.
All right, thank you. I want to move ahead to item 84.1, that's on page 30 of your report. As well as that, and that is the swabs from shoes of Ms. Jefferson, correct?
That is correct.
All right, and what results did you obtain related to Ms. Jefferson?
The DNA profile was interpreted as single source. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile versus the scenario where an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the DNA profile. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 7.6 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile.
All right. Item 103 on page 31 is a suspected hair from Ms. Josephson's shirt. Is that right?
That is correct.
And there are 4 sub-items to that.
That is correct.
Is it fair to say that for 3 of those 4 sub-items of the hair from her shirt that no DNA profile was developed? Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. What about the one, is there one that did have a profile?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you find out about that?
For item 103.3, a DNA profile was developed. Due to the limited information obtained, no further interpretation will be offered.
Not enough information to reach any conclusions.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to another grouping of items of evidence in the case. Let's talk about items that were collected from the black Chevy Impala. I want to take you back to item 3. It's page 4 of your report. That is a swab from a rear driver door interior panel. Did you test that, or was any testing done for that item for whether or not it was blood?
Yes.
What was the result of that?
Presumptive testing for blood was positive.
Okay. And then as far as the DNA analysis, what are your results related to Ms. Josephson on the swab from the driver door interior panel?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual versus the scenario of it being 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 3 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
So in regards to that swab from the interior of the rear driver door panel, very strong support that that blood is Ms. Josephson's. Is that correct?
I cannot say that result.
It was presumptive for blood, right?
That is correct.
Very strong support that her DNA is included in that mixture.
Very strong support for the possible inclusion of Samantha Josephson.
Okay. Thank you. Item 22. Actually, item 22.1, page 14. There's a swab from a stain below address window on envelope with handwritten list on back, correct?
That is correct.
All right. What was your first comparison that you did on the envelope, the stain from an envelope?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture versus the scenario where 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 3.7 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
What were your findings for that item as it pertained to Mr. Rowland or any of the other standards that you were provided?
Under the same scenario, the following individuals are excluded as contributors to the mixture: Xavier McFadden, Nathaniel Rowland, Marcus Dewane Williams, Maria Howard, Oshimer Williams, and Derod Fleming.
All right. 22.2 is the same envelope with the handwritten list, but this is a swab from the outer edge of that item. What was your first comparison on that item?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus the scenario of 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributing to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 42 billion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
So again, using your verbal scale, would it be correct to say that there's very strong support that Ms. Josephson is part of the mixture on that item, the envelope outer edge?
There's very strong support to see this DNA profile if the scenario where Samantha Josephson is included as a possible contributor.
All right, thank you. Were there any other individuals that were included in that analysis?
There were not.
All right. All right, I want to take you to item 38. .1, sorry. That is, what item is that?
These are swabs from the cuff area and in between fingers of item 38, which are blue plastic gloves from the front passenger door panel of the Chevrolet Impala.
What were your results of that analysis?
The DNA profile developed is a mixture of at least 5 individuals. Due to the complexity of this mixture, no further interpretation will be offered.
I believe you spoke earlier about how, I think you said, if it's more than 4 contributors, then you cannot reach a conclusion. Is that right?
That is correct.
And there were 5 on this item?
Yes, that is correct.
The blue plastic glove from inside the Impala?
That is correct.
Okay. 39.1, did you have the same findings?
Yes,
And that is also a blue glove from the Chevy Impala, is that right?
that is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 45.1, can you tell us what that is?
These are swabs from the right sleeve near the cuff of a black jacket, brand Robert Comstock size XL, from the rear passenger seat of the Chevrolet Impala.
And how many profiles were developed from that swab?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 individuals.
All right, and what are the results related to Ms. Josephson on that item, the jacket?
In the scenario where Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture versus the scenario of it being 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals that contributed to the mixture, the result is the DNA profile is approximately 3.7 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Were any of the other known standards that you have included in that mixture?
No.
Staying with the black Comstock jacket found from the Impala, item 45.2, I'd ask you the same question about your first proposition in that.
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus a scenario of being 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 2.7 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
All right. And were any of the other known standards included in that profile?
No.
Okay. Can you talk for a moment about the relationship between touch DNA, as you've described it earlier, versus DNA profiles developed from other bodily fluids, such as blood on a particular item within a mixture?
The type of DNA that we get from blood is from the white blood cells within it. The type of DNA we get from touch DNA is from skin cells. We typically have more abundance in blood than we would in skin cells.
So is it fair to say that if there was an item that contained blood, it could overpower a touch DNA sample if there was any other DNA on whatever the item is?
Yes, that is possible.
Okay. Item 45.3, also part of the Robert Comstock jacket from the backseat of the Impala. What was your finding as a result of that analysis?
The DNA profile developed is a mixture of at least 5 individuals. Due to the complexity of this mixture, no further interpretation will be offered.
Okay. Item 62, that's on page 24. It's the swab from the steering wheel of the Impala. Were you able to reach any results regarding the steering wheel as it pertains to Mr. Rowland?
Yes, the DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. In the scenario where Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus the scenario where 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture. The result is the DNA profile is approximately 970 billion times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
And again, the level of support on your verbal scale that goes with that statistic regarding Mr. Rowland's inclusion of the mixture on the steering wheel is what?
This statistic falls in our very strong support range.
Which is your highest level of support?
That is correct.
Did you also have any results regarding this steering wheel item as it relates to Maria Howard?
I did.
All right. And what was that result?
Under the same scenarios, the DNA profile is approximately 41 septillion times more likely if Maria Howard and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Item 63 is the gear shift from the Impala, correct?
That is correct.
What was the first comparison you did regarding the gear shift of the Impala?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 4 individuals. In the scenario, Samantha Josephson and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus it being 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals that contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 390 billion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
All right. And then regarding the same item, the gear shift, was Mr. Rowland included in that as well?
Under the same scenario, the DNA profile is approximately 150 billion times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
So in regards to both Mr. Rowland and Ms. Josephson, there is very strong support for their inclusion on the gear shift as part of the mixture, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And then lastly, in regards to the gear shift, what were your findings as it pertains to Maria Howard?
Under the same scenarios, the DNA profile is approximately 27 times more likely if Maria Howard and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
What level of support does that fall into on the verbal scale?
This falls into our weak support range.
Is that the lowest level of support?
That is correct.
All right, sticking with the car, item 64, a swab from the exterior door handle of the rear passenger side of the Impala, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Was Ms. Josephson included in that profile? Or that mixture, rather?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributing to the mixture. The result of that is the DNA profile is approximately 140 quadrillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
And the level of support for Samantha's inclusion on this item, the door handle of the rear passenger side, is what?
This statistic falls in our very strong support range.
Okay, same item, same swab, same profile, mixture, excuse me. What was your result related to Mr. Rowland?
The DNA profile is approximately 9,100 times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
What level of support does that correspond to?
This statistic falls in our moderate support range.
All right, last one regarding that exterior door handle. What was the result regarding Maria Howard?
The DNA profile is approximately 2 times more likely if Maria Howard and 2 unidentified unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
2 times. Does that fall in the weak support category?
That is correct.
All right. Item 139.
I apologize. I need to add something to
Sure.
that
Yes.
result.
Yes.
Whenever there's the possible inclusion of multiple individuals in a mixture, we have to compare them together just to make sure that still works. For this item, the DNA profile obtained could not be explained by a combination of DNA from Samantha Josephson, Nathaniel Rowland, and Maria Howard under the listed propositions, all contributing to the profile. When we have this happen in an item, it is recommended to draw your conclusion based on our level of support for the the statistic associated with the individual.
All right. Thank you. Item 139.1, page 61. What is that item?
These are swabs from the foot, bed, and understrap of black and red Nike flip-flop from the trunk of the Chevrolet Impala.
Were you able to interpret that item?
The DNA profile developed is a mixture of at least 5 individuals. Due to the complexity of the mixture, no further interpretation can be offered.
All right. Item 140.1. What is that?
This is a swab from scraping the interior of a black beanie, the brand Field Grade, from the trunk of the Chevrolet Impala.
Okay. And what was your first comparison to that item?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 4 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus the scenario of 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributing to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 210,000 times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
All right. So according to the verbal scale, that would be what level of support for Ms. Josephson being part of the mixture on the beanie?
This statistic falls in our strong support range.
Okay. And your second comparison regarding Mr. Rowland?
The DNA profile is approximately 11 octillion times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland and 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 4 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Showing you what's been marked as States 18 for ID. Can you tell me what that item is?
This is the parent item, which is the black beanie.
From item 140.1 that you just discussed?
That is correct.
And again, regarding the analysis on this item, States 18 for ID, you indicated strong support for Ms. Josephson's inclusion in the mixture. Is that correct?
That is correct.
and very strong support for Mr. Rowland's inclusion in this mixture, correct?
That is correct.
Your Honor, this time the state would offer state to do 18 indictments.
Says it does.
Your Honor, object for lack of foundation.
That was marked for ID purposes only yesterday. It is admitted at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just very, very briefly. That's the beanie we're talking about, Agent Dewane, correct?
I did not see the parent item, I only received the
The
cutting.
cutting from this item, I guess, from item 140.
That is correct.
Thank you. All right, one more item regarding the, well, a couple more items regarding the car. Item 47, I'm going to jump back for you, sorry. 47.1, that's on page 20, is that right?
That is correct.
All right. And what was your results regarding that related to Samantha Josephson on that item? What is the item, 47.1?
These are swabs from the footbed and understrap of a black and red left side flip-flop found in the trunk of the Chevrolet Impala.
And your results were related to Ms. Josephson on the flip-flop from the trunk.
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 individuals. The first scenario is Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture versus the scenario of 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 2.9 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Very strong support, correct?
That statistic falls in our very strong support range.
And what about your results as it pertains to Mr. Rowland in regards to the flip-flop from the trunk?
Under the same scenarios, the DNA profile is approximately 35,000 times more likely if Nathaniel Rowland and 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture than if 3 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
All right, thank you. And what level of support was that?
This falls into our strong support range.
Thank you. Did you also generate a second report in this case regarding some swabs taken from the Impala?
I did.
All right, do you have it in front of you?
I do.
If I may refer you to that, please. In regards to item 67, there's a swab from rear side center console of the Impala, is that right?
That is correct.
Was Ms. Josephson included as that part of that mixture?
The DNA profile was interpreted as single source. The scenario is Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile versus an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the DNA profile. The result of that is the DNA profile is approximately 6.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile.
And this swab from the rear side center console, was it tested for blood?
Yes, presumptive testing for blood was positive.
All right, item 71, swab from front passenger seat headrest. Was that tested for blood?
Yes, presumptive testing for blood was positive.
And the results related to Ms. Josephson's inclusion?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from 2 individuals. Scenario 1 is Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture versus a scenario where 2 unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture. The result of that comparison is the DNA profile is approximately 3.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if two unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
All right. Item 72, rear passenger seat of the Impala, was that tested for blood?
Yes, presumptive testing for blood was positive.
And your result regarding Ms. Josephson's inclusion for that item, which is a swab from the rear passenger seat of the Impala?
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture originating from two individuals. Scenario 1 is Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the mixture versus the scenario where two unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture. The result of that is the DNA profile is approximately 4 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture than if two unidentified, unrelated individuals contributed to the mixture.
Number 75, item 75, swab from the side of the driver's seat headrest of the Impala. Was that tested for blood?
Yes, presumptive testing for blood was positive.
And the results regarding Ms. Josephson on that item?
The DNA profile was interpreted as single source. Scenario 1 is Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile versus an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the DNA profile. The result is the DNA profile is approximately 6.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile.
And lastly, regarding that set of items, item 77 was the swab from a driver's seat buckle receiver. Is that right?
That is correct.
And was that tested for blood?
Presumptive testing for blood was positive.
And the results of your analysis regarding Ms. Josephson?
The DNA profile was interpreted as single source. Scenario 1 is Samantha Josephson contributed the DNA profile versus scenario 2 where an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the DNA profile. The result of that is the DNA profile is approximately 6.8 septillion times more likely if Samantha Josephson contributed the profile than if an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed the profile.
All right, thank you, Agent Duane. I want to turn your attention to the last grouping of items that we're going to discuss, and these are items that, as testified to earlier, came from the Mountain Brook series of evidence. Item 106.
Should review that, let's all stand for a moment.